Hi, Psych 3320 students. I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about the scientific method. We all have personal biases, opinions that can influence how we see the world. The scientific method is what makes psychology a science. The scientific method is not a particular technique or tool. It's more of a general approach to gaining knowledge. What we're trying to do by utilizing this method is to remove any of our own personal biases or opinions that can impact how we see the world. We want to take the subjective, our own personal biases and opinions, out of the objective. And we do that through the scientific method. When we think about our sort of everyday, non-scientific approach to the world, it's very intuitive, relying a lot on our intuition. Basically, our judgments are based on what really feels right to us. Science focuses on the opposite of that, right? It's about empirical information. Judgments are based on direct observation and, more importantly, on experimentation. Experimentation is the gold standard for looking at cause and effect relationships, and is really critical in the scientific method. So using these sort of non-scientific, everyday observations in the world, they're pretty casual, they're uncontrolled, our personal biases and a lot of other factors could influence these observations. In science, we do not want that to happen. Right? So we engage in more systematic, controlled observations. And the greatest control that we can have is in an experiment. Right? With a lot of the factors involved in the experiments are discussed in Chapter 1. So we look at what is an independent variable, what is a dependent variable. We'll talk about those in a second. But first, let's talk about how the four goals of research, description, prediction, explanation, and application, relate to the goals of the scientific method. So for description, we want to define, classify, catalog, or categorize events and their relationships. We can describe symptoms associated with depression. Right? That would be a basic example of description. The next step would be looking at prediction, or looking at the correlations or the relationships among variables. So in our observations, we may notice that variables seem to be related, that there's a relationship between things. Let's say, for instance, I notice that my kids are more aggressive on Saturday morning after watching a violent television show. Let's say Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Right? They're watching this and they seem to be much more aggressive to one another afterwards. I mean, start to think, maybe there's a relationship here. Maybe watching this aggressive TV show is leading to more aggression in my kids after watching it. Right? Well, we can look at the correlation between that, right? Simple relationship between these variables. What is critical to keep in mind is that correlation does not mean causation. Just knowing that two variables are related does not allow us to say that one is causing the other. In order to get at the causal relationships, we must conduct experiments. But correlations are useful in just looking at the relationship between variables. And it does allow us to predict something. So for instance, a very strong positive correlation is between self-esteem and academic performance. Positive correlation means they move together or drop together. So for this example, as self-esteem moves up, so does academic performance. And then they drop together as well. Positive correlations move up with one another and drop together. Negative correlations, as one goes up, the other goes down, and vice versa. So a good negative correlation could be alcohol consumption and GPA over the course of a semester. If somebody is consuming a lot of alcohol, they may be struggling academically. So the more alcohol consumed, the greater struggle in their academic studies. It's an example of a positive and a negative correlation. And again, when we know that there's a relationship, it doesn't tell us anything about cause and effect. So to get at cause and effect, we need to have experiments. Right? So explanation, the third goal of psychology. Explanation happens through experimental designs. So if I'm truly interested in looking at this violent television and aggression in kids, I could have a study that allows me to look at this phenomenon. So the independent variable in an experimental design is the variable that is manipulated or controlled by the researcher. The dependent variable is the variable that we believe is going to be impacted by what we did in our manipulation. So let's say I have 100 kids. I'm going to randomly assign, so random assignment by chance alone, they're going to end up in either the violent television group, they're going to watch 30 minutes of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, or 30 minutes of Barney, a very non-violent television show. By random assignment, by chance alone, they end up in one of these two conditions. This allows us to say that these groups are roughly equivalent prior to what we are going to do. So the variable that's under our control, the independent variable, is violent television. The dependent variable, let's say, is aggression in this situation. One way that's commonly One way that's common to look at aggression in kids is with a Bobo doll. A Bobo doll is a weighted doll. You can punch it, and because it's weighted, it comes right back up. So kids can smack it around for an extended period of time. So we're going to count hits to the Bobo doll as aggression. So what we think is going to happen is that the kids who watch 30 minutes of violent television are going to be much more aggressive than kids who watch 30 minutes of Barney, very non-violent television show. So the dependent variable, aggression, we believe is going to be impacted based upon our manipulation. Violent television or non-violent television. Basic structure of an experiment. Very basic experiment. 2 conditions, violent television and non-violent television, and the dependent variable. Again, what we think is going to be impacted by what we've done with the independent variable. The fourth goal of psychology is application. Our ability to apply the knowledge that we've gained through scientific studies to improve people's lives. 2 types of research, basic research and applied research. Both are valuable, both are needed. One is not better than the other. Basic research really focuses on understanding behavior and mental processes, seeking knowledge for its own sake. Applied research, in contrast, is research that's engaged in to change people's lives for the better, often in very real-world or natural settings. So maybe I'm running an experiment in a natural setting looking at ways to reduce prejudice and discrimination. Right? Very strong application to that research. All right, this is a very basic overview of the scientific method.